Typical Sunday where Brendan Rodgers is finally gone. I think a lot of people are anticipating it for quite a while, but overall you'd say, was it really a fair crack of the whip for Brendan Rodgers, especially at Leicester when things were sort of on a down anyway? It kind of feels unfair on him, but at the same time, it's kind of typical what happens under Brendan Rodgers. Let's break down why, but if you haven't already subscribed, hit that subscribe button and welcome to the channel. Enjoy it. Anyway, Brendan Rodgers is gone. 7 wins, I think 5 draws or four draws, 17 losses. It's not exactly the kind of results set that you would like from any of your managers, even if they are only minorly getting some investment. And on top of that as well, I don't even know if Brendan Rodgers didn't get all that much investment. Brendan Rodgers had a pretty decent team in the first place. He had some very talented players in there, and whilst there were some aging or waning aspects of the team, you would definitely say that Brendan Rodgers had a side that was more than capable of not being on the cusp of the bottom 3. Now, the bottom 3 in the Premier League is not the place you want to be, right? Because as soon as you're there, people start questioning your credentials. And Leicester has sort of been hovering above and around there for quite some time. I'm not saying that, they were meant to always stay up or always meant to be challenging for titles, but at the same time, I think that they expected more than that. However, ever since the tragedy where their owner died, tragically obviously, in a helicopter crash, and his son took over, there has been a bit of stasis that the club has entered, and you got to say you just feel sorry for him. I mean, overall, it must be so difficult to have to pick up something like that immediately after such a terrible tragedy and try and continue your own father's legacy. And to an extent, I think Brendan Rodgers has been impacted by that. Working out where the club goes from there, working out how much you want to invest, working out what you're actually going to do in terms of investment, but also in terms of running the club day to day, how invested you are, how invested, and how also you get it back to where it was. Expectations got so high at one point because obviously they won the league that it became impossible for them to fulfill anything beyond that outside of the club. Now, the thing with Leicester City fans is, I know they seem like very reasonable people whenever I've met them. We know Blue Van Man and people like that, and I know other people in Leicester, having grown up in the Midlands. It was always a club that had very reasonable expectations, very much. Look, whatever we get here that's above just being in the Premier League, we're very grateful for, and that's what made that run so special. But of course, that run was not Brendan Rodgers. That run was under Claudio Ranieri, and ever since then, they've struggled to hit those heights again. In fact, even when they were in the Champions League, I think a lot of people felt they were quite underwhelming because they hadn't hit the same heights, they hadn't reinvested in what they needed to do, and it sort of made the overall task of any manager after that virtually impossible. There was an element of expectations were so high that they gotten into the Champions League spots that anything after that would have been a major disappointment. And when I say major disappointment, I mean for anyone else outside the team. Now, on top of that, we know that Brendan Rodgers also has a problem sometimes in motivating squads in the long term. And when I say in the long term, I mean longer than maybe 3 seasons at a time. The real issue with Brendan Rodgers is after a while he begins to lose the players. Relationships begin to deteriorate, his own self-belief and his own sense of what he wants the team to be begins to degrade, and after a while you start to have a bit of an issue with him and his relationship with everyone else at the club. I'm not saying he's a bad person, I don't think he's a bad manager, but I think he sort of gets into his own head. I witnessed this as a Liverpool fan myself. Other people at Celtic have also witnessed him just sort of going into a stasis and not really being able to take the team or the club much further. Belief begins to dwindle, players begin to become disinvested, and you start to get to a point where Brendan Rodgers as a manager starts to look like a bit of a lame duck. Now, when I say lame duck, I think that's probably unfair on him because he is a very decent manager, but it doesn't leave him in a great position now in leaving the team, right? I mean, at one point, there was a genuine discussion that Brendan Rodgers, and this was a genuine discussion that I had with a lot of Man City fans, would be one of the candidates to take over from Pep Guardiola. Just let that sink in for a second. One of the genuine candidates to take over from Pep Guardiola, at least at one point, was in the position basically 3rd from bottom in the Premier League. I think a lot of people who question Brendan Rodgers, especially some people, close friends of mine, were probably right to do so. But at the time, he was doing better than, or we wanted to give him more credit in the bank because we felt that he was a good man. We felt that he was the kind of person that you want to manage a football club, someone who cares, someone who seems very genuine, someone who you actually feel you can create a relationship with as a fan base. But after a while, like I said, he goes into this stasis and things just begin to sort of go, what's actually going on here, guys? I'm not quite sure where we're going with this. Beyond that, of course, Leicester haven't invested. Leicester haven't put back into their own team because of the stasis that they're in. And you get the feeling that everyone around the club just sort of went, Okay, we're in the Premier League. Where now? That's always a negative at any Premier League club. Every Premier League club, if you're staying still at any Premier League club, is going backwards, because everyone else in any of these situations is always reinvesting, always moving forward. Even Southampton, who are in a terrible position, even Bournemouth, who have been in a terrible position in recent times, even Nottingham Forest, all these teams who have been in kind of precarious positions are even looking to be innovative, they're looking to change, they're looking to upgrade things. Now, they have a world-class facility in terms of training centre. They're trying to upgrade the stadium, though I'd imagine it's, there is a bit of a challenge in that, but even then, it's like they've got enough space, there's everything in place where they should be able to do that as well. But they're also in Leicester. And I think the real issue was so much money came into the game, so much better scouting came into the game, and they were slightly ahead of that game before. Staying still, not reinvesting, having all these issues around the club just not really knowing what the direction was, means that other people got ahead of them and their departments were basically kind of picked apart. People who were good sort of went elsewhere, and it made someone like Brendan Rodgers' task impossible. He needs a team around him. If you want to compete for anything in the Premier League, you're always going to need, at least some form of reinvestment and some form of moving forward, but Brendan Rodgers just wasn't really getting that. On top of that, I think with everyone else in the league moving so far forward, and there being this level of kind of, not only City getting investment, but also the likes of Newcastle getting investment. Spurs obviously had their level of investment, and at one point Leicester beat them to a league title. Chelsea got even more investment. Liverpool got even more investment. I can go on with all these teams, even teams to the point of Brighton are sort of moving ahead of them now. And you would have thought maybe a De Zerbi would have been the kind of candidate that you would want to see going to a team like Leicester. That just leaves your club in a point where it's like, okay, what now? Now, you could say maybe he was looking for some investment from somewhere. Maybe he was waiting for someone to come in with a monster offer to kind of take the club over. Maybe going down, getting some parachute payments and coming back up in a new form is good, especially if you're not going to be in the sort of a, Champions League or Europa League position. But even then, that's disappointing. And the run of Leicester, the end of this era of the Premier League Leicester City is precariously close to ending right now. And that's sad, because we're talking about recent Premier League champions here, people who put such a run together that they were so far ahead of some of the other teams who have invested ridiculous amounts of cash. Leicester were the underdogs that punched up, but under Brendan Rodgers, whilst they were paying good stuff, I could see that the players were no longer really sort of invested in this project, and you could see that there were multiple different players that wanted to either leave the project, move on into maybe something bigger, and you can tell Brendan Rodgers kind of took that sort of thing personally. Now, that's not a personal dig at him, because I remember the documentary about him. I remember the documentary about Liverpool where he was in it, and the picture was up on the wall. People took a lot of that stuff out of context. Him getting his teeth whitened, him getting a new girlfriend, all these kind of things when he first moved to Liverpool sort of stuck with people, because they wanted to take digs at a guy that they thought was genuine and was probably a prospect to actually move Liverpool forward at the time. But the point is, on top of that, it created a public persona that meant that privately, a lot of people also questioned some of his credentials. A lot of the players were questioning him. Is he world-class in the way that other people are? If I'm Maddison, am I looking at him and thinking, yeah, you're taking me to where I want to go? If I'm a new player coming in, if I am one of the world-class players, or one of the potential world-class players that wants to go to Leicester, so you're probably going to get a win there, how good do I think Brendan Rodgers is? What's the quality of Brendan Rodgers that I go, that makes me want to go to the club ahead of anyone else? Because when it was a Claudio Ranieri who was possibly taking the team forward, when there were other prospects in the window, you think, maybe I could do something with that. Leicester, is accessible to a lot of big cities in, not only Leicester, but also, it's a couple of hours from London, it's a couple of hours from Manchester, it's not far from Liverpool, it's not far from Birmingham, all these kind of things. And that makes it quite livable, shall we say? And then also you get kind of a cult hero status because you go to Leicester. You've got to say that losing to Crystal Palace yesterday was probably a bit of the final nail in the coffin, really. The main reason being that, they just got rid of their manager and they brought someone else in. If you feel like you're behind everyone else, if you feel like you're not able to get the best out of the players anymore, and other people have turned things around very quickly with, say, a Roy Hodgson or someone like that, what are you meant to do? How are you meant to reinvest players who basically go, Roy Hodgson's gone in there and we just lost to that team? It was a series of results which put nails in that coffin, but yesterday really was the final straw. Brendan Rodgers, someone who hangs his hat on being tactically innovative, someone who's smart, someone who's ahead of the game, possibly has been slightly left behind in the way that things are done around clubs and going to a team like Leicester. He was at Liverpool where they were on the cusp of the forefront, and then he went to Leicester. after Celtic, which was obviously very good. So some people don't even give him credit for Leicester, so I sort of feel a little bit sorry for him in that case. But in that sense, Brendan Rodgers never really got the escape momentum from sacked manager at Liverpool at any point after this, after the sacking. And Leicester was a fantastic club to go to, but it always felt like he was a little bit doomed. Brendan Rodgers will not have that in Leicester, but he will be fondly remembered as the man who just took a good kick at it. But he didn't. He did let some sort of inertia set in, right? There was a sense of, we just let the momentum carry us at this point, and whatever we get after that is sort of a benefit of just, well, me coaching well. The coaching began to come a little bit staler. He began to, I think he didn't believe in the project anymore. And now I wonder, what do Leicester do next? If Leicester do go down, is that possibly a good thing for Leicester? Go down, retool, come back up? Get some parachute payments, get your finances. I mean, the finances have always been in order. They seem like a very well-run club. But you know what I'm saying by that? Or do they go for a big manager who can give them a bounce at the end of the season? Is there anyone who is a bounce at the end of the season? Is there someone who can come in and make Leicester the team that stay in the Premier League ahead of, I mean, even a Bournemouth who are coming back up at the moment? You know, the chances this season, and I'll say this, I'm going to do a top 4 video later in the week. Chances this season, we see at least one, if not two, of the big recent stalwarts in the Premier League go down. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll see you in a bit. Much love. Bye. Much love. Bye.